Now remember, your table should have by now designated one person to make the dash. Because after I read the 5 winning tables, I will give a signal for the rest of you to make that dash. Everyone hear that? I'm going to wait for it to quiet down, and I'll tell you one more time.
Alex, you know what it is?
Ladies and gentlemen, just to make sure this goes smoothly, if I could have your absolute attention for just a moment. Here's what's going to happen. I am going to share with you the top 5 tables. As soon as I say your table is one of the top 5, your designee should be making a go for it. Because rest assured, the next table behind you is going to be going for it. When I get done with the 5, I'm going to pause. And at a random point, I will then say, go. And then the designee from your table will head over there and pick a dessert, hopefully without hurting themselves or others. With that said, the number 1 table this evening that gets the first choice at the dessert table, and Dinesh, there is a cake with your face on it over there. I don't know if that's a complimentary thing or if somebody just wants to cut into it, but either way, it's there. It is table number 20. Table number 20 with $852. Table number 2 is table 4.
Good job.
With $590.
Oh.
The next table is table number 5. Table number 5 with $360. The next table is table number 6. Table number 6 with $250. And the next table is, I just want to see if you picked a bad designee. You know, she didn't even speed up when I said next table is. Usually that gets them running there for the rest of it. And the final table for the solo choice is table number 37. Table number 37. Now I'm just pausing for a moment. See a little young guy at the time, Dinesh D'Souza, speak for the first time. And I've enjoyed watching him over the years ever since. Let's welcome this visionary filmmaker, Dinesh D'Souza.
United States of America versus Dinesh D'Souza. And I have to tell you, as an immigrant, it really sends a chill down your spine. I should tell you a little bit about my heinous crime, and that is that I exceeded the campaign finance limit by donating $20,000 to a college friend of mine who was running for the U.S. Senate. This is back in 2012. Now, no American has actually been prosecuted, let alone been locked up, gone to prison for doing this. Right about the time my case was in the court, another guy named Chutwal, an Asian Indian guy. We Asian Indians appear to specialize in campaign finance violations. Well, in any event, this guy gave $180,000 in straw donations to Hillary and a whole bunch of Democratic candidates. And he got community service and a fine, but no prison, no confinement. I, by contrast, was sentenced to 8 months in a federal confinement center, kind of a facility supervised by the Bureau of Prisons. A very interesting experience. Now, I mention this because I think in some ways this big election that we're gearing up for this year, this is an election that's not merely going to be fought on the issue of freedom. This is a day to celebrate freedom, and we are. But the cardinal virtue of the other side, their trump card for this election is going to be the issue of justice. Justice. And we hear about it all the time. Social justice. Obama talks about the fair share. Justice is the moral claim of the Democratic Party. Now, I got a taste of it in the area of criminal justice. And remember, when it comes to justice, it's obviously not just a matter of did you break the law, but is your penalty proportioned to the offense? Did other guys who did the same thing get roughly the same penalty? Progressive justice, I think, is a kind of sham. But we need to be aware of and challenge the left on the issue of justice, because what often happens in politics, and this happened in 2012, we play the king, which is freedom. And then they play the ace, which is justice. And then they win the hand. Why? Because justice is actually the primary virtue of every society. Aristotle puts it at the very top of the political virtues. Freedom is very important, but freedom can sometimes be legitimately taken away. We deprive people of freedom all the time, and if the reason for doing it is legitimate, then it's acceptable. But there's no such thing as good injustice. Injustice is always bad. Now, as a consequence of my misdeeds, incidentally, I think many of you know, my real misdeed was 4 years ago making the movie 2016. Which annoyed the imperious man who sits in the White House. And people say, well, Dinesh, come on. You think that the President of the United States gives you any thought? What makes you think that he was bothered by your film? Well, my evidence is that right after the movie came out, innumerable attacks on the film began to appear on a website titled BarackObama.com. Now, the attacks were unsigned, but if you actually read them, in their pomposity, in their indignation, in their incoherence, they bore the unmistakable signature of our current chief executive. Now, I found myself, as a result of this prosecution, spending 8 months overnight in a federal confinement facility in the south part of San Diego. It's right on the Mexican border. And in the beginning, I was a little baffled, because I actually thought that I had beaten this attempt on the part of the government to send me to federal prison. But when I showed up at the confinement center, the guard behind the desk, he goes, what prison are you coming from? I go, well, I didn't get prison. This is my sentence. And he goes, well, that's too bad. I go, well, what do you mean? He goes, white collar prison. He goes, you meet mayors, city aldermen, doctors who defrauded Medicare. Very interesting company. They have an activities director. It's great. And I go, well, what about here? He goes, whole different class of people. So little did I know that these confinement centers are essentially places where criminals, having served their sentence, or most of their sentence, they go to these places before they are sent into society. It's a kind of transition spot. But you get attempted murder, domestic violence, drug smugglers, coyotes. We get the whole gamut of hoodlums. And so it dawned on me that I'm going to be sleeping in a room about this size on bunk beds with 120 of these guys for 8 months. Now, in the beginning, I was very unnerved by this because I thought, I can't speak to anybody. There are all these groups and gangs in here. It's very Byzantine. The Hispanics, who are the majority, even they were in multiple groups. The American Hispanics are called Southsiders. They have their own gangs. The Mexicans have their gangs. So I'm like, I can't talk to this guy. That guy's going to want to kill me. I'm just not going to speak to anyone. I mean, I did consider starting my own gang. But I realized I probably have to occupy all the offices. But then, really after about a month, I thought to myself, this is not good. Here I am, I'm actually a conservative in a very unusual place. I mean, there are just not a lot of conservatives around here. I'm not going to walk down the hall and see Charles Krauthammer or George Will. I'm kind of like an anthropologist in a strange land among the natives, except I was myself a native. So I began to talk to people, and I began to learn what I'm going to call the ideology of the criminal underclass. Now, my previous familiarity with the ideology of the criminal underclass had mainly come from 2 viewings of The Shawshank Redemption, in which I had come to believe that most criminals insist on their own innocence. But in talking to these guys over a period of time, I realized that their actual view is somewhat different. Their actual view is, we did it, we're guilty, but we are the small fry. The big fry never get caught. The big fry are at large. The system doesn't even really go after them because they run the system. So this got me thinking. In this very strange world, I would lie in my bunk bed and I'd listen to these inmates talk to each other, and I realized that their horizons are very limited. They talk about food, sleep, money, sex. That's pretty much it. They live at a very elemental level. And because they live at a very elemental level, they see human life as motivated by very base impulses. Now, the reason I tell you all this is that for 25 years I've been a writer and speaker. I've been looking at American politics as a clash of ideas. We believe in freedom. They believe in justice. We believe in equality of opportunity. They believe in equality of outcomes. And so on and so on. Now, it is the point of view of the criminal underclass that this whole way of looking at American politics is total nonsense. Why? Because real human beings are not motivated by debates. Real human beings are motivated by avarice and hatred and greed and revenge and envy. And if these are the actual motors of human life, it's no surprise that this is what will drive American politics also. And so for us to pretend like we're living in some kind of a debate is to totally miss the point of what actually drives our politics here and now in America. We have to look We have to look, in other words, at what we're up against, and we've also got to look at how we counter that and what we specifically, not in general, but specifically can do. So that's what I want to focus on in the brief time I have tonight. I'm going to be kind of up against the clock, and I'm going to have to adopt the motto that King Henry VIII used with one of his wives. He said, "I won't keep you too long." But I want to offer a thought in a crucial state with a very important group of people. Here in this room, there is a huge amount of concentrated power. Most of it, I will tell you, unused. And in order to be used, it has to be used effectively. But in order to be used effectively, you have to know what it's being used against. So what is this? What are we up against in 2016? I want to suggest that what we're up against is not people who disagree with us. We have been looking at Obama that way, even Hillary that way, for 8 years. Obama doesn't get it. He's an amateur. He doesn't know what's going on. We need to educate him. And so as Republicans, as conservatives, we have been conducting, I want to call it the Obama Education Project, for 8 years straight. Hey Obama, we want to remind you that Vladimir Putin used to be a KGB officer. Hey Obama, if the mullahs say that they want to build a bomb, they probably do. Hey Obama, confiscatory tax rates and promiscuous regulation is not going to enhance economic growth. And on we go. And none of it gets through. Obama is an unbelievably slow learner. Why? Because he's a fool? No. He's actually about something else. Hillary too. They've got a different goal in mind. So what is that goal? What are they actually trying to do? I want to suggest that what they're actually trying to do is to steal America. To steal America. Now, what does that mean? One question to ask yourself is, what is the most valuable thing that the world has ever produced? What is it? Is it the automobile? The airplane? The computer? Well, freedom, yes, but I'm actually talking about what is the most valuable thing. The most valuable thing the world has ever produced is the United States of America. Because the United States is not just an invention, it's the invention of invention. It's the creation of a system of creating wealth. And by wealth, I don't mean the $3 trillion federal budget. And I don't mean even the 19 or 18 trillion dollar gross domestic product. I actually mean the entire wealth of the country, all the land and all the buildings and all the money in your bank accounts and your savings accounts and your kids' college fund and the value of your furniture and your TVs, and if you add it all up, it's about $75 trillion. That is one pile of dough. And that's what the Democrats want to take. By take, I mean control. I don't mean that they want to nationalize every industry. They're not socialists in that sense. They're way too lazy to be socialists. Because a socialist wants the government to own the means of production. A socialist wants the government to go to Midland, Texas and drill for oil and do fracking and take the oil out of the ground. Bernie Sanders does not want to do any of that. He doesn't know how, and he doesn't care. He wants the people in Midland, Texas to go under the ground and take the oil out and then put it into drums and then label it. And then the government will come in and tell them what to do with it. They will come in at the end point, once the wealth is all created, and direct it. Now, this is their goal. And so you have a clash, in America between the wealth creators. The wealth creators, by the way, are not just entrepreneurs. It's the whole process of creating wealth. And this process takes imagination. Marx called the wealth creators capitalists. His basic attack on them was, all they do is supply capital. So they don't deserve any profit. Of course, capital earns a rate of interest, so pay them the rate of interest and be done with it. The wealth is created by labor, it's created by society. It's not created by the entrepreneur. But in reality, entrepreneurs don't supply capital. You think Steve Jobs used his own money to make the iPhone? No, he went to a bank. He went to a venture capital firm. What actually the capitalist supplies is the idea for the business. And then the organization that makes the business happen. And then the entrepreneur takes the risk, which the employee does not take. Apple can't go to the employees and say, oh, we had a bad quarter, give back half your paycheck. No, those guys prefer security. They want to be paid first. The entrepreneur gets paid last. So we have wealth creators in our society, and then we have very powerful people who try to sponge off, siphon off, control, dominate that wealth. They're not just community organizers. They're not just in politics. They're in media, they're in education, they're in Hollywood, they're in Broadway. In other words, it's a powerful intelligentsia that is mobilized to make this attack on wealth creation and the wealth creators. Now, remarkably, we, as Republicans, as conservatives, were going into this big election. But it is true, unfortunately, that over the past 25 years, we have allowed the other side to take over the biggest megaphones of our culture. The loudest voices, the best way to transmit information. We have conceded that ground. We've been fighting in one corner of the battlefield. And they have been doing the long march through the institutions. Which institutions? Hollywood, Broadway, the whole world of comedy. They have Colbert, they have Jon Stewart, they have Bill Maher. We kind of have nobody, and nobody. We don't even compete in an area where a lot of young people get their information. And then the universities. The more selective the college, the stronger the left stranglehold on it. Deep inroads into elementary and secondary education. So, long term, we cannot win if we let this ground remain, these big guns, these megaphones remain in the control of the other side. Not that we're not doing something about it, it's just that the things we're doing about it are not enough to make a real difference. So, for example, on the campus, we deploy speakers. Ben Shapiro, I go speak on campus. But of course, I go on Tuesday, I'm gone on Wednesday. I'm speaking next week at the University of Wisconsin. But the professors who are there every day. And they assign all the reading to the young people, and they control their grades. And those people are not accountable to anyone. They're not afraid of anyone. They're not afraid of the legislature, they're not afraid of the parents, they're not afraid of the administration because they have tenure. And they certainly aren't afraid of the students. So, this is the, I will say, difficult situation that confronts us. It's forced me, as a writer, a speaker, to... That being said, I'm under no illusion that documentary films are the gold standard in Hollywood. No. The big guy in Hollywood is not Michael Moore, Steven Spielberg. Because Hollywood's most powerful stories are told through romantic comedies, dramas, animated films, family films. Ultimately, to compete, you have to compete there. Now, in this next election, I'm making the movie. You saw the trailer. You saw actually is a bit of a sanitized trailer. We played this trailer in front of the movie God's Not Dead 2. But if you want to watch our real trailer, go on YouTube and Google it. It's a lot more hard-hitting. This trailer was, because it was running alongside a Christian movie, it had to be censored. But that being said, we have a very powerful film that is going to be, it's not just about Hillary. It's a whole story of progressivism and the Democratic Party. And it's a story that's never been told in a way that is unanswerable. Now, timing is important in a film. So I'm going to open the film probably the week of the Democratic Convention. And the film will open in 2,000 theaters. It's a little known secret about films that the whole fate of your film hinges on the opening weekend. If the film does well in the opening weekend, it'll go from 2,000 theaters to 3,000 theaters the next week. If it does poorly, it'll go from 2,000 to 1,100 theaters. So people say, how do you get your film seen by independents? The answer is, don't worry about that. Just go opening weekend. Take your friends opening weekend. And see, we're not talking about giving $1,000 or $500. It's $10 to buy a ticket. So if you can give 5 high school students a ticket and have them go opening weekend, you're putting fuel in our rocket. It's a way to really help the film. Now, very often I'll speak in California, I'll speak in Texas, and people will say to me, well, what can I do? How can I have a difference in the election? Because here in California, we're in a blue state. Or here in Texas, we're in a red state. So what can I do? Well, the answer is, if you're creative about it, there's a lot you can do. This election will probably be decided in 8 to 10 swing states. In those 8 to 10 swing states, there are maybe 2 million independent voters. And their votes will tilt the balance one way or the other. The names and addresses of all those 2 million people is known. We have it. The RNC has it. Our PACs have it. So we'll make this film and we'll put it in the theater in July. The film will come out in October in DVD. Now, as a group, I can't do this because I'd be skirting the election laws. Don't want to do that again. This film will be upsetting enough to them. But there's nothing to stop you, as Republicans, as a group, to say, all right, if we think this film has powerful messaging, we're going to identify 10,000 swing voters in Ohio and 10,000 swing voters in Florida and drop that DVD, which will cost pennies on the dollar, into their mailboxes of the actual people who are going to decide the election. So the campaigns are spending hundreds of dollars and winning a single vote, but this is a highly lethal, targeted way of putting a 90-minute message of a very powerful kind. Because a lot of times people who make films, they get it wrong. They'll tell me, Dinesh, make a movie on Obamacare. We've got to do Obamacare messaging. Problem is, nobody ever went to see a film to get messaging. People go to see a film to be entertained. And they go to have an emotional, not an intellectual, but an emotional experience. It's not even that they want to see characters extracting revenge or falling in love. They actually want to feel those emotions themselves. So a really good film understands this and capitalizes on it. And a film is, in a way, a devastating medium because it engages all the senses. You read a book, it engages your mind. You see a play, it engages your ear, because a play is mainly about what is said, dialogue. They can't do that much on the stage. But when you see a movie, it engages your eyes, your ears, your mind. So if you entertain people and you engage them emotionally, you can do all kinds of messaging and people will digest it very happily. Hollywood knows that. They use their stories to convey messaging. But they also know, even Michael Moore knows, that he has to make his films entertaining. Now, here we are in this room as a group, and a very powerful group. Most of you are extremely well connected, and you have you have reach, you have friends, and then they have friends. And I just want to illustrate for you I've seen in my own life in just the last couple of years the way in which the networks that we have can be deployed in very powerful ways. And I want to give one example of this. In 2014, when I made the film America, right before the film came out, I released a book, America, Imagine a World Without Her. And this book was in every Costco in the United States. Now, right around the 4th of July, Costco decided, as a corporation from the top, let's pull all copies of the America book out of every store in the country. And so the book literally was there, and then it wasn't there. And I didn't even know about it. An employee at Costco was super puzzled because the book had just come out, and he saw people picking up all the copies and taking them away, and then he found out that this was not just in his Costco, but all the Costcos. And so what did he do? Well, he called a friend of his who knew another guy who was a writer for a website. Not a huge website, we're not talking about FoxNews.com, Rush Limbaugh. This is WorldNet Daily. WorldNet Daily. And a reporter wrote an article in WorldNet Daily, Costco pulls America book written by immigrant. And there was a big hubbub about it. 1,000 people were really upset, yelling and screaming at Costco on the WorldNet Daily site. I call this an online mob. Online mob. But totally ineffective. Why? Because the online mob is in the wrong place. What does Costco care? WorldNet Daily. Then, interesting moment in the history of social media, someone in that group decided, why are we on the WorldNet Daily site? Let's migrate and mosey over to the Costco site. And so the snowball begins to roll toward Costco, except it's now gathering snow. By the time it gets to Costco, it's 17,000 people. A big number, but not that big. This room times 20. So these 17,000 people are now raging against Costco, and what they do within 24 hours is they destroy the Costco site. Now I don't mean they do any vandalism, none of it. But when you shop in Costco and you buy pants, or you buy grill, or you buy wine, or you buy toilet paper, you can register your point of view. You can kind of weigh in as a consumer. And so if you went to shop on Costco in that day, you would see people from all over the country just cutting up their Costco card and sending little pieces of it in the mail to the CEO. Here. So this dude, a Democrat, he goes into panic mode, and he has an emergency meeting. He flies me out from San Diego, sits me down, and the first lines that come out of his mouth are the following. Dinesh, he says, you are destroying Costco. I'm destroying Costco, a multi-billion-dollar corporation. I said to him, it's not me. I haven't said a word about the subject. I said, basically, you have antagonized your own customers. So I said, your problem isn't with me, it's with your own people. In any case, he totally got the point, and by the time I landed back in San Diego, Costco had announced, number one, they were reversing their decision. Number two, restoring all my books to Costco. Number three, ordering 25,000 new copies of my book. Number four, when the movie came out 2 weeks later, Costco built a special standee about the size of this podium. So everybody's DVD was on the big table, and my DVDs were on a special designated standee. Now, who did that? I didn't do it. The people who let Costco know, they did it. And it was a small number of people using concentrated laser-like effectiveness. And it's no different in an election. Abraham Lincoln once said, America is run by public opinion. But he did not mean America is run by the opinions of the public. Because the truth of it is that the public, the ordinary guy, doesn't know and doesn't care. The ordinary guy probably is only going to vote not even every 2, every 4 years, and that if it isn't raining. So the real motor of American politics is not driven by the public, it's driven by that subset of the public that really runs the country. I would estimate that group to be about 200,000 people. A lot of them are in this room. It's a smaller group of people who are hands-on, who are active in some way, who write letters and do blogs and serve as delegates and who participate in the process. They're the ones who set the goalposts between which every politician must move. So here we are in this room, and as I said, it seems to me we have enormous concentrated power. Power to shift the fulcrum in this state, but think bigger. Because actually you, collectively and creatively, can shift the outcome even in the country. I want to close by telling you an anecdote that a professor once told me about the lion tamer and the lion. He said, here's the lion, and here's the lion tamer on a pedestal, a little guy with a stick. And here's the lion tamer doing little machinations with the stick, and here's the lion obediently doing tricks in response to the promptings of the lion tamer. And then the professor raised an interesting question. He said, who is actually more powerful, the lion tamer or the lion? Well, it's obviously the lion. But then why is the lion so obediently and sycophantically following the instructions of this lion tamer? Well, the answer is because the lion doesn't know its own power. The lion thinks that the lion tamer is more powerful. And so it is with us. Here we are, we feel like we're ordinary citizens, these leaders of ours that will take advantage of us. There's nothing we can do, we're on the receiving end. But no, we are actually the lion, and this whole stealing of America, there's only one way for it to happen. It can only happen with our consent. This is democratic theft. These people aren't breaking into Fort Knox. They're relying on votes and coalitions. They're relying on the makers and the takers. They're relying on crafty arguments about social justice. This is their pitch. You know, when I was in the confinement center, I learned about the pitch. The pitch is basically the scam that a group of convicts pulls before they pull off a job. If you want to rob an old lady, it's really nice if you can get her to lift the little latch. So you don't have to really kick the whole door down. She's already kind of opened it for you. But how do you get her to do that? You've got to sweet talk her. Social justice. These are clever pitches that are aimed at making us lift the latch. So it's time for us to realize that the American dream kind of hangs in the balance. This hasn't happened too often in our history, but it is actually happening now. And so, most of us would rather do something else. I've got all kinds of feature films I want to make. I actually want to have ideas about online education. But by tragic necessity, the burden of taking this battle on has fallen into our hands. We may not be the best people for the job, but we're kind of the only people for the job. So here we are, and it is our destiny, and we may as well embrace it. And if we do, I think we can play a role in saving our country. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
And make sure that we can change the education system so that it's not an indoctrination on the left.
The question is, how do we fight effectively on the college front and combat what appears to be almost a monopoly of ideas?
Good.
It isn't that our young people have rejected conservatism. It's not that they've decided, I don't want to be a Republican. They don't even know what a Republican is. They've never been exposed to it. Now, it seems to me, long term, there's only one solution. It's not just speakers on campus. It's not just creating alternative institutions a la Hillsdale College. All those things are good. But in order to combat the left, if we were trying to do this 25 years ago, we would actually have to start 300 campuses, which is a gargantuan task. Today, happily, no. We don't have to do that. But what we do have to do is something that requires a great deal of creativity, and that is we have to invent the academic iPhone. What I mean by this is that if we can figure out a way to deliver high quality education. Online education right now is low cost, but in general it's low quality. The reason that higher education looks down on it and doesn't feel threatened by it is that no one has figured out how to do online education that is low cost, extremely high quality. Because if you can do that and deliver it, it will be at a fraction of the price of higher education. And in one blow, you will threaten this whole massive industry. Long term, that is the way. Short term, we have to, well, a long time ago I heard William F. Buckley raise a very interesting question. How can we be conservatives in a liberal society? Think about it. As conservatives, our job is to conserve. We conserve the ideals we believe in. But what if you live in a thoroughly left-wing liberal culture? What do you conserve? If you conserve, you'll be conserving liberalism. So Buckley's point was that if you live in that kind of environment, the far left campus, you have to stop being a conservative. Meaning, you are a conservative in conviction, but you have to become a complete radical in your strategy. You've got to become a guerrilla. Not a gorilla, but a guerrilla. You have to turn the apple cart upside down. You have to attack the underlying assumptions. You have to disrupt the place. You have to cause havoc. So, this is a great deal of fun if you know how to do that. You have to make the whole thing extremely entertaining. You have to figure out what it is that annoys the liberals the most and then do that repeatedly. In doing so, you won't solve the problem, but you will hold the ground until someone comes up with the academic iPhone and the problem is attacked at the root level. But in the meantime, we're kind of in a Wild West out there. Okay? All right.
This is not really a question for you, but for everyone sitting here today, what are we going to do about the patriots that are in prison right now in Portland that are standing up for our rights? Eamon Bundy and Ryan Payne and the rest of the patriots that stood up for our rights. What is your opinion on that? And what are we going to do about that? Are we going to let them rot in prison that they don't have rights? Where we have rights, we're supposed to have rights. Due process. What's your opinion?
I do think, let me say this, I think one of the most remarkable developments in our society in the last couple of decades has been the extreme militarization of all different arms of our government. Even arms of the government that have nothing to do with the military. We're not talking about the police or the CIA or the FBI. We're talking about the post office and the Bureau of Land Management and the EPA. And these people have SWAT teams. And so today we live in America today. I'm going to give you my tiny case, which was a white-collar case. It involved giving money. Now, most crimes are about theft. Most people are trying to steal money. When I was in the confinement center and I told people what I did, gales of laughter would break out because no one could comprehend an offense where you didn't stand to gain. All crime is about stealing. And but even in my case, as I say, white-collar, non-violent, the U.S. government, once it deploys against you, brings unbelievable resources to bear. And so, in my case, for example, whole squadrons of FBI agents assigned to me. Get all my bank records, all my tax returns. They go through this with a fine-tooth comb. They get all my books. They assign FBI agents to read through every book, underline passages, whatever they can use. So you suddenly get this feeling that an inexorable power with unlimited resources, unlimited ruthlessness, and unbelievable military power is up against you. And it's even difficult to convey this to people because you're the only one in their sights. So I'm just giving you a little feeling of what it's like to be on that receiving end. And I can only imagine if people are, facing actual weapons pointed at their heads, which I did not, what that must feel like. Okay, so I'm not resolving the specific issue. I don't even know enough about it. But I am saying this to me is a very worrisome trend in our society. And I don't think some of it is developed as a kind of organic response to terrorism. But don't forget, it is very much in the interest of the collectivist party in this country. Collectivists have to collect. Right? You can't rob America without knowing where people's wallets are. And you cannot get into their homes if you don't have the power to kick in the door. So what I'm saying is that it is not, to me, there are pretexts for why this has happened, but there is also a vested ideological interest in militarizing our society in order to make our citizens into bovine targets of the federal collection agencies. Yes, I agree.
And a question back here. Could you comment on the current election and what's at risk?
Well, the question is what is at risk? Look, the American politics has changed since I came to this country in the late 70s as an exchange student. I always thought of American politics as two parties and we agree on goals and we disagree on means. I always thought that both parties agree that America should be strong, America should be prosperous. We might disagree about how to distribute the rewards of American success. But I've been very startled in the last decade or so to see that I think there's been a turn in the Democratic Party. Carter, Dukakis, these guys were bunglers. They did stupid things. They didn't understand basic things about American politics or foreign policy, the principle of the lesser evil. If you want to get rid of the bad guy, try not to get the worst guy, which we did in Iran when we pulled the rug out from the Shah. We got Khomeini. But no one thought that Jimmy Carter wanted Khomeini. He was a buffoon. This was presidential nincompoopery at a very high level. But my point is that the Nincompoops Award has not been transferred to Obama. Carter still holds the title. With Obama and now with Hillary, we're dealing with a different cast of characters. Even the Democrats know this. I mean, look at the support for Bernie. I mean, Bernie? Rip Van Winkle? Just woken up from the 20-year nap? I mean, a professed socialist? But the reason the Democrats are going for Bernie, part of the reason, is that the person running against Bernie is an adopted member of the Corleone family. So that's a bit of what we're up against. Okay.
Question over here.
Okay.
On more of a personal note, I'm sitting back here listening to you and I watch your video, YouTubes and everything. You're fantastic, intellectual acumen is fantastic. But on more of a personal note, having been in prison while you're sitting there on a bench, what was your feeling and attitude towards the public when you found yourself in prison? Did you expect the public to do something? And if you did, what would you have wished they had done to keep you out of prison?
The question is about how I felt about the public. Now, right from the beginning of this case, I got an incredibly warm response from people on our side. In other words, I think the main goal of the Obama administration, it wasn't just to lock me up. It was actually to discredit me, to put me out of play. They would have liked it such that I would never be invited to speak on a night like this, and all these people would not be here to come listen. They would love that. Now, so that hasn't happened. Our team, which is to say in this case the Republican Congress, has been trying to help with this case because they smell a rat. They know that no one in American history has been prosecuted for doing what I did. They know that this penalty makes no sense. They also know that the government has filed documents in which they misrepresent. They know all this. I think there's a difference in the way that our team plays politics and their team plays politics. So there's a congressman in Florida who says, "Give me Dinesh's case file." The U.S. Congress has all the power to subpoena the file. They could have that file on their desk. But when they do this, they'll do it in a hearing in which the Obama Justice Department guy goes, "Well, we don't like to actually give out the file because there are all kinds of issues of confidentiality, prosecutorial discretion. We're reluctant to part with the file." Now, normally this argument would carry some weight, but my case is over. It's been adjudicated. I've served my 8-month sentence. The case is closed. We have inspector generals who are empowered to get these documents. So here's my point. They will put up a squid-like cloud of rhetoric, and at the very least this will confuse, baffle, and delay our guys for months until the next election has already occurred and the whole thing is completely moot. I say this not in reference to me particularly, because a lot more is at stake than me. If you look at the Supreme Court, the majority of people on the court, even now, have been appointed by our team. But when the case comes before the court, the Democrats can count on their 4 guys with Euclidean certainty. They have 4 votes in the bag. We cannot count on our own team. How's Kennedy going to vote? Oh, we got Kennedy, whoops, we lost Roberts. Now, why this discrepancy? It's because our team is coming to an intellectual picnic, a constitutional debating feast. Their team is coming to a knife fight. So, their Supreme Justices vote like good Democrats. Our justices are bandying about constitutional theories, about judicial restraint and this and that. At the end of the day, they are playing to win. And we are playing as if what really mattered is the fun of the game. And I only mention this as a metaphor for politics in general. Because, again, this goes back to good old Sun Tzu and later Clausewitz, that in a battle at the end of the day, it's not even the side with the superior forces, but it's the side that with the superior strategy and will that's going to win. So even if we had the votes but lacked the will, they'll still beat us. Because they have a lot at stake. Now, a lot of times people say, well, we don't have that much at stake because we don't get government benefits. We have even more at stake than they do because we are actually the wealth creators, and it's our wealth that they want to take. They don't just want to raise your taxes from 39 to 42. They want to take your stuff. And if we don't have the power to stop them, no one will. So, at the end of the day, I've had a very eye-opening experience. I've been very lucky to come out of it the way I have. I mean, in the confinement center, as I look around, there were some white-collar guys in there, and most of them, their lives were done. I mean, if you're a doctor and you prescribe painkillers and they prosecute you for it, I don't care if you're right or wrong. Once you're convicted, you can't practice medicine ever again. You got to go be a construction worker, do something else. Your life, as you saw it, is finished. Well, my life isn't finished. It wasn't finished the day I walked in, and it wasn't finished the day I walked out. So a very peculiar temperament in these sorts of things. They have the tendency to annoy me and fire me out. And so I'll be putting a lot of that, deploying a lot of that this year. Okay, let's take a couple more questions and we'll maybe move on. Yes? Okay, one more.
Hi there. First, thank you for being here. Myself and my college student body president of my college, and immigrants as well. And I'm also in a student exchange visa. This is kind of a different topic. I just kind of want to hear what do you think of the H-1Bs, also known as skilled visas, knowing that this year 70% of them were filed from Indian citizens. Thank you.
Well, let me answer the question this way. To me, the immigration debate is not a debate about being for or against immigration. This country actually has and has had a very generous immigration policy. We take about 1 million legal immigrants every year. To me, the real question is, what kind of immigrants do we want? I mean, what kind of people do we want to bring to this country? The real immigration problem is that we used to bring immigrants who were attracted to the club of America, the club of opportunity, of social mobility, the club of the ladder, and who wanted to assimilate to the American way of life. I mean, why would you join a club if you didn't like the club? You didn't like the way people were in the club, and you didn't like the way the club operated. A couple of years ago, we're now living in the time of multiculturalism. You know, all cultures are basically equal. Actually, no. Every immigrant knows that that mantra is actually a lie. All cultures are not equal. And how does the immigrant know that? Because the immigrant is voting with his or her feet in the most decisive way possible against one culture to which you are intrinsically prejudiced. We're all born into a world where these are our family, our neighbors, our friends, my school, everything, my whole world. Now why would I leave it and go someplace else where I'm a complete stranger? Unless I felt at the core of my being that this other society is going to offer something better. Not equal, but better than the society that I'm voluntarily leaving. A couple of years ago, I'll close on this note. I was speaking to a group of South Asian students at Harvard, mainly Indians, but some Sri Lankans and Pakistanis and other South Asians thrown in. And the young woman stood up and asked me a very poignant question. She said, "Ever since I come to America, I felt like I live in no man's land. I'm not really Indian, I'm not really American. So I'm trying to sort of understand, how will I know when I've become an American?" And I said, "You'll know you've become an American when you become a Republican." Half facetiously, because we Republicans were the party